Hey everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Anne and I'm the consultant at the Digital Transformation Hub, a part of the Info Exchange group with Connecting Up. The Hub focuses on digital technology as an enabler to support service transformation and new ways of working, assisting nonprofits on a broader digital transformation journey. Before we begin, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issue, please type it into the chat box and I can assist you. If you have any question during the sessions, please also type it into the chat box and Sophie and I will answer them by the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as you think of throughout the sessions to make this as interactive a session as possible. No question is too silly. If you are on a Wi-Fi connections and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs you have the best experience. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you as soon as we can after the webinar ends. Before we start, I would also like to remind you that there will be a short survey after this webinar. Today, I'm excited to welcome you to NFP Employees Mastering 365, working with cloud files. Hello, Sophie.
Hi, thank you very much, Anne. Sorry, I muted a couple of people as you were entering. It was more that so that we could hear Anne as she was talking, but please at any stage come off mute and ask a question or pop it in the chat as well. Great, so I'm just admitting the last couple of people as they come in. But first, thank you, Anne, for the introduction. I first would, one more person, a couple more people trying to come in, that's all good. I first would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So thank you for joining us. I think someone's got an echo on. If you can just mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you. So a little bit about myself. Anne and I are digital transformation consultants here at the Digital Transformation Hub, and we both spend our time talking to non-for-profits about their technology environments and helping them take the next step with their digital transformation. So we might spend our time talking about Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, through to talking about information systems, whether it be their client case management system, CRM, etc., through to digital marketing, cybersecurity and IT management. So all of those different sort of topics, but today we're going to spend our time talking about working with cloud files. So we want to be able to build your confidence and understanding in the file structure within Microsoft 365, so that next time that you're working with your colleagues, that you are able to feel confident in what you're doing and improve your remote working experience. So by the end of the webinar, we're hoping to be able to evaluate the best option that suits your needs when file sharing, discuss why one option stands out as the preferred option when file sharing depending on your size, and weigh up different considerations when file sharing internally and externally to ensure that you've got the best fit solution. Great. So it's one of those things, we've heard a lot of people talk about cloud file storage solutions. You might already be partially using it, you might not. It can be quite daunting, even if your organisation has it set up and not sure about the configuration, but it does also provide great flexibility and opportunity to your team. So some of those benefits include version history, so that you're able to automatically update every time your file is saved, and a history of who last edited the document is also available. So the other day I used this exact piece where I had started updating a document and was doing the incorrect updates. I was actually able to go back to the prior version. So that was a really great feature of Microsoft 365. The ability to collaborate at the same time. So changes, previously how it would be done is you'd use your track changes would be manual and you'd go back and rectify it. Now you're able to collaborate at the same time, see the changes they're making and where they are in the document and actually talk to it about it together. External sharing. So instead of sending a file like we're used to and having file size limitations in an email, etc., You can now share large files via a link. The recipient is able then to able to access them, and you've got additional controls on what they can see and what they can edit. Mobile access. So they have access to the document files anytime, anywhere. There's pros and cons with that, but that's what the offering and a great feature of it is. You're able to set file level permissions. So you've already got folder permissions, but actually within that specific file, you can determine who has access and who doesn't have access. And the ability to create very large files. So you might have been previously limited by your network drive capacity, but in the cloud, you can have something like 250 gigabytes of storage capacities. It's massive. So thinking about all those benefits and the options that can provide to your team, it starts to think, what can Microsoft 365 offer? What do I use and how do I use that within my team? To understand the webinar further and what Anne's going to go through following this is to understand the different applications that sit within Microsoft 365. So Microsoft Office, before we migrated to this style, used to be just an Office pack. So, it had Word, PowerPoint, Publisher, Excel, etc. Microsoft shifted their model to what we call a software as a service, or you might have heard SaaS solution. It changed their pricing structure, but more importantly, it was able to offer more productivity services and the cloud-based file storage and collaboration. So you no longer needed that large server room, which means that there's multiple solutions within Microsoft 365. So let's dive that a little bit deeper into the three most common file storage solutions. So OneDrive, so that's the cloud logo just there, lets you store and protect your personal files, then share them with others by granting permission and access from any location or device. Anne's going to dive into why I've highlighted personal files a little bit further in the presentation. Oops. Teams. You might have seen the Teams app with the T. You might use it every day. It might be something that you've just joined on our session today and this is your first time using it. Welcome. This can be a collaborative app for your team. So whether they're working remotely or in an office, you can develop, collaborate, and publish work together. It's a workspace hub. So it's got the centralized chat function, it's got the call and the video function, but it also enables you to quickly message files and share files more effectively than email, and can also cope with the bigger file sizes as well. Sharepoint. So that's with the S logo just here. We see this typically used by larger non-for-profits and corporates. And the rationale is its complexity, but it's also designed to store the organizational files. So it enables collaboration and sharing across the organization as opposed to the Teams feature. It can have restricted groups within it as well. We typically see the larger non-for-profits and corporates use this as their intranets. So thinking about the three apps and what it offers, when should you use one over the other? Anne's going to dive into that now.
Oh, thank you so much, Sophie. So let's talk first about OneDrive. OneDrive should be used to store documents and files that you wish to keep to yourself, as known as private. It's a lot like the old network drives that we had for our personal use, but way more useful and easier to access from everywhere, any laptop, any device that you would like to, as long as you have an internet connections. With the move to remote learning and working, a lot of schools and businesses have moved to using OneDrive for file storage. It can also be used to store and share draft documents with a few people on a temporary basis until it is ready to eventually store in Teams or SharePoint. OneDrive allows you to sync files from the cloud to your computer. It's called Personal OneDrive. And then files that you store in Teams, SharePoint document libraries also can be synced to your computer. using OneDrive technology. So if you look at the image on the screen right now, it's an example of a OneDrive that is synced to your computer. It's look very similar to all the files that you have been using with File Explorer on your computer, right? With OneDrive, you no longer store files on your PC, but in the cloud to protect them from loss and deletions. Changes are updated whenever you have an active internet connections. And also key folders such as desktop, documents, or pictures should also be synced to your personal OneDrive, so they're not lost. These files and folder can be managed using Windows Explorer and synced on demand to conserve bandwidth and file storage. So Microsoft invented this very smart thing called on demand. Back in the day, you store all the files on your computer and it up your space on your computer. But now with on demand, they only store the metadata, which is created date, author of that file, what is the type of that file. So all that sort of information about the files, the moment you click on the files or folder, that is when OneDrive actually download the file to your computer. So they are smart enough that they only store some of the latest frequently used file on your computer. When you stop using those files for a while, they automatically remove those files from your computer. But if you work a lot offline, you want to keep those files ready, downloaded on your computer, you can also choose to always download those files to your computer instead of on demand. So it's really smart like that. Let's move on to talk about Teams. Teams is the front interface for SharePoint and OneDrive. So it's like a one-stop shop. And then you're just accessing them from a different front end. Teams directs you to SharePoint when you open a file, or OneDrive when you share files in a private chat. Remember that a private chat is only visible to those participating in the chat. You should try to minimize the amount of files shared in private chats, as once a person leaves your NFP, the private chat becomes inaccessible. So the smart way you can share it is you share it through links. So yeah, you can try with Teams, upload some demo files in there and try sharing it with other people. And then you can have a really good experience with how it works in real life, and then find out the best way that fits for your organization as well. Move your file from OneDrive to Teams when you're ready to collaborate with your teams and pairs. So as I move on from Teams to SharePoint, there is a very nice saying from one of my participants in previous webinar. So OneDrive is for one person, and SharePoint and Team is to share with other people. So it stays in the name as well. Let's find out more what is SharePoint and then when should you use SharePoint. SharePoint is used by several nonprofits, and then it might be a buzzword that you have heard before. SharePoint works with file storage and synchronization as well. For smaller nonprofits, we recommend that the use of Teams is preference to SharePoint. However, SharePoint is great for larger NFP to use for the intranet. Now that we have explained SharePoint a little, we're going to focus on OneDrive and Teams, as that the two cloud technology that the majority of you will be interested in. But feel free to let me know through the chat or turn on your mic during the Q&A to ask more about SharePoint. So let's compare Teams and OneDrive. Here's a quick high-level view of Teams versus OneDrive. Remember that OneDrive, instead of thumb drive, hard drives, personal drive, is to store and edit your personal documents and files in draft format, while Teams is used to communicate and collaborate on documents with internal and external Teams members. So you can see that both are file storage technology. However, with Teams, access is determined by permissions of the folder, while OneDrive is personal storage. it's by default only accessible by the individual that own the OneDrive. Only when that person chooses to share the files or folder, other people can access those that they choose to share. Teams for Teams collaboration, organizational files. OneDrive is for personal storage. Both have version history and collaboration. So whenever you accidentally make some unwanted changes or you accidentally delete the file, you can restore them and retrieve those changes. With Teams, you have centralized control permissions. However, with OneDrive, the permission must be managed individually. So I have customer that they have used OneDrive for organizational files, and then I highly recommend that they must move to Teams or SharePoint for those organization files. Else, when the number of files grow larger, it's going to be very hard for them to keep track of those permissions. With Teams, you have a whole lot of functions, like dashboard, libraries, calendar, branding tools, and then the number of features just grow because Microsoft is constantly updating Teams, while OneDrive is like it's only focused on file storage and sharing only. So I hope it's give you an overview of Teams and OneDrive. Now let's talk a bit more about sharing files internally and externally. Sharing files is very easy when using cloud technology. So instead of sending the file like we did in the old day, you attach the file to your email and then send it, and then download the file and then make some edit on it, and then you attach the file to another email and then send it again. Now with cloud technology, we just send a link to the document, which enable the recipients to access it, and then you all can collaborate in the same documents. And then should you need to, you can also send the file itself rather than a link. But yeah, the cloud is very handy for you to collaborate and edit at the same time. When sending a link to the file in Teams, you do not need to be concerned about the file size or email limits. If you send the file itself, you still need to take this into considerations. For example, your PowerPoint file might be 14 megabyte and your email attachment might limit to be 10 megabyte. In this scenario, the file will not send. And then you better serve to send a link to ensure the recipient received the file without any delay. So that's about sharing. Now, enough theory, we'll talk a case study. If we look into real-life applications based on what we learned so far, let's call this guy David. David has to draft a grant proposal and want to save it somewhere where it can be accessed by anyone except him. So he's going to use OneDrive. So the file is only accessible to him, and then no one can access that grant proposal draft. Once David has finished the draft and proofreads and he's happy with it, and he's want to share with his colleagues to review it, the best way to facilitate is, as he wants multiple people to review at the same time, is to move it into the grant proposal folder on Teams. So once that file is moved to Teams, he create a link and send the link to his teams, either via Teams chat like what we are doing now or via email. With that link, his team can access the proposal and mark it up with any changes and comments, and then David can review it in real time. They can work on multiple paragraphs with each other while in the call like us right now. And they can talk about any clarification if needed. So the proposal can be submitted on time. So when David has resolved all the comments and completed the review feedback, it is ready for board approval. He can send the same link or the finalized files link of the proposal to the board. So it's a very common case study when there's a document that a group of people or a team want to edit with each other. I hope that is that is everything I want to bring up about cloud sharing and cloud files today. And then now we move on to the Q&A sessions. Do you have any question for us? You can either turn on the mic or put it in the chat. We do receive some questions beforehand via email. So I will start with those questions first before you pop in any further questions. Sophie, do you want to take these questions? What is the best practice of sharing file in OneDrive and Teams?
The best practice, and I think you've spoken about it really well, Anne, is that if you're working on personal files, they sit within your OneDrive. If you're working within your team, popping them in Teams so then everyone can collaborate and see together. Now, those two options, it depends on the individual. For myself, I work completely in Teams. So if I'm starting a new file, it's already in the shared space. Some people work differently, so it's really down to how they work effectively. And about providing both options to everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sophie. The next question is from Katie. What is the advantage of SharePoint and how it is best used for organizational files? As I stated in the webinar, the advantage of SharePoint is it's highly customizable. So the fact that it's highly customizable brings both pros and cons. The pros of it is it can cater for every single permission setting you would like to make, any file structure that you want to structure. It acts as an intranet for your organizations and sometimes file management system as well. Yeah, it's very convenient for your organizational use because the look of it is more familiar than Teams because Teams is a new interface that might not be as common as what we have been using. However, the cons of it is as it's highly customizable, the cost might be so much higher for you to implement it. Also, with SharePoint, you have to go to Teams to have chats and meetings and all the other functions. So when you train your staff, you might need to train multiple applications instead of just one. So I just had a conversation with one of the NFP yesterday. He had 40 volunteers comes and go 2 or 3 days a week, and he struggled with training those new volunteers. So he had to make the decision between using Teams or using SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and then multiple Microsoft applications at the same time. So he chose Teams because it's easier to train one application, everything at one place instead of multiple places. And his organization is small. Their staff are happy with chatting and calling via Teams instead of having to emailing everything because that's more constant, more instant. So that is the pros and cons of SharePoint. It is best used for organizational files when you have clear structure about about your files and folder. But whenever you want to move your files to either SharePoint or Teams, and then start any migration project, please remember that you really need to look back to your file structure, clean your files, archive the old files that you no longer need, and then talk with your team members of whether the current file structure or current environment is working for them, and then gather those feedback and then work on those with each other. So that's my take on this question. Do you want to add anything, Sophie?
I was just going to say, KB's got a follow-up question, is that so SharePoint becomes File Explorer in a sense. You're also can be welcome to come off mute and speak as well and respond.
Yes and no. So technology is born to serve our needs, right? It's not something we have to follow blindly. If the needs of if your needs is only to store file or just one file, then it acts as a file storage space for your organizational files. But if you only use it for storage and miss out on other functions like intranet or organizational updates, or you can post news about. Oh, sorry, Katie. I hope you get well soon. So you miss out all the other features, then it might be a waste, because it's also a space for organization to connect with your staff. I work with organization that they have to be on site a lot. They do not have internet on site, so they are not very responsive via chats or Teams meeting. So that's why they chose to use SharePoint, because they still want to have some update about their organization. Once in a while, or every week, every fortnight, the organization posts some news about everyone. People post update and story about their case in the internet in SharePoint. So yeah, SharePoint can have a lot of other features other than file storage as well, but just because in this session we focus on working with cloud files, that's why I emphasize a lot on the storage. I hope this answered the questions. While waiting for a response from Katie, Sophie, do you want to take the next question?
Sure. I'm going to go back. So I've seen your question, Rose. I'm just going to answer Sarah's from earlier. Why can't you view email attachments in Microsoft Teams? Is there a setting to change this? Now, Anne is a little bit more technical in Teams. So what the answer to this is that there's quite likely a configuration piece that we can explore further with you and take it offline and actually look at your instance, but it's quite likely. Do you want to answer it, Anne?
Yeah, so with SharePoint, most of the commons file type can be open in Teams. So for example, if the mail attachment is, normally you don't open email through Teams. You still use Outlook for email with Office 365. The moment you upload the email attachment to one of the folder in Teams, for example, that is when you click on the file in Teams, it opens up. So if it's the attachment normally is Excel or PowerPoint file or Word file, then you can open it in Teams. But with some very special type of files that can only be opened with specific software, then I'm afraid that you might still either you need to sync your Teams folder to your File Explorer and then open it just like how you normally open it with File Explorer, or you need to download the email attachment to your computer and then open with that specific software. But I can say that most common file type can be opened when you upload file onto cloud. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
No worries.
Amanda, did you have a follow-up question to that?
Not a follow-up. It's a very basic question, so I apologise for that in advance. But when you're in Teams and you're wanting to start a new team, I haven't been able to find how to do that.
So the short answer to that is that it might be likely a configuration piece. Some people do have permission to create teams, some people don't. And that has to do with how your files have been set up. If you have the permissions, if you scroll to the end of the channels, you should be able to see add teams.
Oh, I can see it. Sorry.
Right.
You've got access. My screen.
That's okay. We're here to answer the most simple question
and the very simple question. I'm sorry, everybody.
No worries at all. The next question is from Rose, you can add files to chats, group chats, meeting chats, team channel. Can you restrict where users can add files so there isn't duplicate copies in different places? Yes and no. So this one should, whenever we move into the new system, there is something called change management process. So you gather your team, you ask them about their needs, you got the needs, you implement the system, and then you train them. You write down the process, and then the team get used to the process, and then it just like the process need to be in place. So there's this restriction in Sharepoint or OneDrive that you must name your file names can be no longer than 200 characters. So that is something that, yeah, we put a restriction there, but your user also need to be aware of it. And then how you name the file, how you structure the file, it's also something that no restriction is better than your team are aware of it and then got the process in place so you can follow them. With configuration in Teams or SharePoint, you can configure, you have different level of permissions like admin, administrator, editor, or just reader or viewer. So if it is something that they should not, it is a place, a file or folder, or an area that they only need to read, you put them as viewer or reader. You don't give them edit permissions. But if it is, yeah, they need to manage it, give them edit permission. So you give the list permission that they need, not everything. And about duplications, yeah, it's currently SharePoint and SharePoint and Teams are born to be very collaborative. So it's hard to restrict people uploading files other than those permissions level. But yeah, when I work with other nonprofits, I talk a lot and then help them a lot how they put a process in place and then takes their staff onto the change management journey from a very early start. So they're aware of those new change and then they're used to new process and new way of working instead of putting, so a very common example is when back in the day you edit a file and then you put version 1, version 2 next to the file name. But once you move to SharePoint or Teams, you no longer do that V1, V2 thing. You just edit the file and then save it. The moment you save it, it's already create a version in version history. If you want to roll back to something, you open version history and then you restore a previous version instead of storing multiple versions in the same files without knowing what is the last version that was edited. So I think it's more of a change management questions and new way of working.
Just to add to that as well, we've got a really great article on the Digital Transformation Hub website that talks a little bit into that change management and part of that is creating some business rules to aid that file storage. So I'm going to pop that in the chat there. It is one of those hard things, and it comes down a lot to user error when duplications can exist. So trying to create some business rules to aid and regularly training your staff can definitely improve that situation.
Do we still have any other questions? So if there's no other questions, I'll quickly pop in the survey after this meeting. And then please feel free to let us know via email, reply to our email if you have any other question and want us to respond in person. So thank you so much for attending this webinar today, and I hope to see you in the next webinar soon. Have a nice day. Bye.